I'll be demonstrating Judy's magic cast on. It was invented by Judy Becker and is a great way to begin casting on for toe-up socks. We start with 2 needle tips facing to the left, and you can use 2 circular needles, 1 long circular needle if you will be knitting with the magic loop, or you may use double points as well. We will have both of our tips facing to the left. This will be your top needle. This is your bottom needle. I'm keeping a little red marker on the bottom needle so that we can keep track that the bottom needle is always in the bottom position. So let's start with our yarn, and we are going to drape that over the top needle. And you'll see that I have my tail here in the front. But unlike the long tail method, we are going to move that tail to the back and keep our working yarn, or what is attached to our ball, in the front. And then I set my hands up just like I would for the long tail cast on. Now when I pull my hands here to the side, you can see that on my index finger I have 1 strand, and on my thumb I have another strand. The index finger is going to be the yarn that will load up the bottom needle, or the one with a red marker on it, and your thumb will be the yarn that will load up our top finger. So here we have our first little stitch is already on our top needle, so we need to load a stitch on the bottom needle. So I am just going to turn those needles up, and I'm going to come over that top hand, index finger, scoop the yarn up. Now I have 1 stitch on each needle. Now to load the top needle, I like to think of it that I am splitting this yarn in between my top and bottom needle, and I'm going to take my top needle behind that thumb thread and scoop it up. Now I loaded the top needle. We're ready to load the bottom needle. I'll go over the index, scoop that up. Time for the top needle to get a stitch. So I'll split that yarn, or have my needles go between that, behind, scoop up the thumb thread. Time for the bottom needle, scoop that up, split the thumb, go over the top and load up the bottom. Now I'm going to do it one last time. Split that thumb yarn, scoop it up for the top, and one last one for the bottom. So now I've got 5 stitches on each needle, and you can see that this last stitch that is on my bottom needle is just really draped over there and not secured at all. So what I'm going to do to keep that stitch from running away is I'm just going to twist that tail and my working yarn so that it's holding that last stitch nice and securely there. So 5 on the top, 5 on the bottom. And this is where I am going to rotate my needles so that the bottom needle is going to become the top needle. So I'll turn that. So now my tips are facing right, and you can see that my previous bottom needle is now the top needle, and those are the stitches that I am going to knit into first. So I will slide out my bottom needle, what was previously the top stitches, and I'm going to knit those stitches to begin the toe. If you are working with double points, you'll need to now grab a 3rd needle. But so go ahead and knit those stitches, and once I have knit that first stitch, I no longer have to worry about that tail being secure. That stitch will stay on there nicely, and I just knit across my needle. So now I'm done with 1 needle. I'm going to take that red marker off since I don't need to worry about top and bottom anymore. And I'm going to knit the stitches that were previously the top needle. And just by the way that Judy's magic cast on works, The stitches on this needle are actually sitting on here twisted. So to undo that, I need to knit these stitches into the back loop so that I now will have them sitting correctly on my needle. So I'll knit all the way across this needle into the back loop. I only need to do this on that second needle on the first round only, because from now on all of my stitches will be sitting on my needles correctly. So now that I have knit all of my stitches, I have a very nice seamless join, and I'm ready to begin constructing my toe. So here you can see that my stitches are all joined nicely together, and now it's time to begin the toe. I like to do a wedge toe for my toe-up socks. So the formula that I follow is I knit into the front and the back of the first and the last stitch on each needle. So let me begin with that. I'm going to knit this first stitch into the front and then into the back of that stitch, and then I will knit across till I get to the last stitch on that first needle, and then I will knit into the front and then the back of that stitch. Now I will get to my second needle, and I'll do the same thing, knit into the front and the back of that first stitch, knit until I get to the last stitch on that needle, knit into the front and the back of that stitch, and I've just completed my increase round. For a wedge toe, it's best if you increase every other round. So that would mean my next round is going to be a plain knit. So I will knit all of these stitches, all the stitches on the first needle, all the stitches on the second needle, and then I'll follow it with an increase round, knit into front and back of the first and last stitch on each needle, and continue like that until your toe reaches the desired number of stitches. Happy knitting!